Hi there, cheers. It's Paulie here. Now, I want to talk about some American Civil War rules. Now, this is from a general series of rules, and it's by the miniatures company Baccus. Now, Baccus makes 6mm miniatures, and it makes brilliant ones. Two companies whose 6mm figures are, I think, the best, Baccus and Aaaah. Aaaah have very big heads and outsized hats. They're kind of a caricature. Baccus are way more accurate. Baccus ones are way cheaper as well. But Baccus has done some rules designed specifically for 6mm miniatures. They're called Polemos. And the American Civil War ones, I think, are some of the best American Civil War rules I've ever found. You can find these on their website. Now, they come either as a PDF version or as a hardcover. But the neat thing about these is that there's actually two rule sets in one, two differing scales. So the first set is called On They Came. Now, designed for 6mm figures, which Baccus sells in like a figure block, which has several figures in it. So you're going to be playing the game with elements which have one or more of these blocks on them. And each one of these in the On They Came scale represents about 500 people. So one kind of fairly healthy regiment, couple of small battalions, or around about 2 batteries of guns, about 12 guns. So that's the scale at which you would play some of the smaller battles of the American Civil War, or at the kind of scale that a lot of gamers feel comfortable with, where essentially you've got 2 or 3 of these units will make up a brigade, and you'll have a division that you can handle, and then maybe you'll end up with a corps, maybe. So the rules have a D6 base to them. But they've got some very interesting mechanisms. There's some gamesmanship in this game, which I really like. So they rate generals. Generals, of course, can be the usual kind of, depending on how active and tactical noused they are, they can be exceptional or steady or whatever. But they give you kind of 2 streams. One is essentially their skill and one is their activity. So you could have a cautious, exceptional general. Or you could have a cautious, energetic general. And obviously, guys can change from campaign to campaign. So you pick your forces. We'll get onto that in a sec. But what you do is, at the start of your turn, you have tempo bids. You roll some dice and you add to that extra points for the competency and energy of all of your generals and the subordinate generals. So you're going to have like a corps commander, and the only other generals you're worried about are divisional commanders. The brigadiers are just presumed to be out there just doing the minuate. We don't even speak to brigadiers. We don't even invite them to dinner. So you roll these dice, and this gives you tempo points. Now, at the start of an overall turn, you secretly bid how many tempo points you're willing to spend in order to get the initiative, the first move for this turn. Now, you both reveal the bid, and whoever got the highest wins. If you have a drawn amount, if one of you had the tempo last turn, they will retain it. Otherwise, if it's the first turn of the game, you just roll some dice and decide randomly. But you both then remove the amount that you bid from your tempo point total. Those tempo points are now used to deliver orders to your troops. So if you went completely bug nuts crazy and bid a ton of points to snatch the initiative, you may not be able to do much. Someone that knows an attack's coming might sit back and decide, I'm going to bid nothing at all, and I'm going to have a lot of points to spend on playing a good defensive turn. Let them come in. So some cleverness there. Now, when it's your turn, you bombard away. So all of your long-range artillery units can shoot. Now, artillery. In this scale, it's divided into, like, smoothbore, rifle, etc. The rifle's got a good range. The smoothbore, on the other hand, gets a bonus if it's firing within a relatively short range. It can fire canister well. There's another thing that you can do with your artillery, and that is you can use it to directly support troops that are making an assault. You essentially attach it to an infantry or indeed cavalry unit, and it will be used in the assault phase, so it won't fire in the bombardment phase. Another thing that I like about this is that you can have artillery reserves. You can have corps and later on army reserves, which you can start to use to split units off from that at the start of the battle. Are you going to use these for close support? Are you going to build up a grand battery? Are you going to have several long-range supportive batteries to sort of buck up different areas? You can also use them to kind of send batteries forward and so on to replace losses on the artillery line. I like it. So, having that artillery reserve park is a good idea. However, once you've done your bombardment, on comes the turns. There's a little chart which shows you how many tempo points it costs to do things. Like many element style games, you can move things as an individual element, or if they're touching other of your friendly units, you can move them as a group. Now, this game's a lot kinder than things like DBA, DBM, and so on. There's not this obsession with, it must be this much in contact and this many corners. No. As long as they're touching somewhere, they presume someone's linking them together. American Civil War and late 19th century armies are remarkable for their willingness to not march around in, tight, idiotic formations. So, cheaper to move a unit forward as a group. You can spend tempo points on things like rallying troops, restoring their levels of steadiness, this sort of thing. You can also spend it to tell groups that have not come under fire this turn to start making temporary fieldworks, piling up fence posts, all this kind of thing, so they can, dig in a bit and make their position better. Pile them rocks higher, boys, pile them rocks higher. You can spend it on all that sort of thing. Now, when troops fire, if they are firing at longer ranges, it actually costs you tempo points to do it. If they are very close range, they'll do it without you having to spend tempo points on it. They're close, they will do it. Yeehaw! If your all movement measurement is done in base widths, so it's really easy to get the measurements, the movement, everything, that's fantastic. If you want to come closer than one base width to someone, then essentially you're ordering an assault, which does cost you extra tempo points. You then kind of move them up to base contact, and now we get the assault phase. So, what happens first to see, does the attack actually go home? Now, the receiving side can effectively decide, is he going to try and hold them off at long distance with firepower? He can also try and fire at the last moment. He can also sometimes attempt a counterattack, particularly his cavalry and so on. So, all right, we are. Essentially, both sides roll, and here's where kind of some of the fun of the game comes from, because you pick each unit and you have a look at how well supported that unit is. So if you've got another unit supporting it, and that could be on its flanks, it gets a bonus. The support could also be behind. You've got a unit touching it from behind. You've got a second wave, you've got that support coming. And if you've got artillery attached supporting, then you get a big bonus. You also get bonuses for being veterans and so on. There's some little charts and tables and so on that make some differences between Union and Confederate, depending on the period of war too. So sometimes early period Confederate veterans sometimes weather this kind of stage a bit easier. They get a +1 bonus and so on. But anyway, you both roll d6 and so on, and you compare. Essentially, if the attacker's score is higher, the attack goes in. If there are differences in the dice rolls, you just look across, and essentially, if you've made a minor difference, then the attack might go in, but with considerably reduced effect. What can also happen is the attackers can just stall, or the attackers can be driven off, or rather, more commonly, driven to ground by the fire. They start going in and they go to ground. If they're completely overwhelmed, they can be driven back. Likewise, the defenders can be driven to ground, or they can be hit with different levels of shakenness by the fire, as can the attackers. And so anyway, this gives you whether the attack went home, whether the guys were driven to ground. You might even chase the defenders off before you get there. Once you get there, there is a little melee system, and again, that will come off largely your troops, what their quality is the guy defending a defended position and so on, and do you have support, either the flanks or behind you. The guns aren't really a thing anymore. It comes down more to troop quality, but it's very, very do or die. So in that kind of firing phase, the bombardments and the standoff and shoot, you'll pick away at the other guy. Deciding to move into that assault distance is utterly decisive. One or other of these units is going to end up reamed. It's just, even if you have a attack that kind of stutters out and falls back, there's going to be unsteadiness on that troop. You're going to have to spend a lot of tempo points to heal it back up again before it can be used for things. So you want to prep those attacks well. You want to make sure artillery has made him unsteady before you go. You want to you want to think about it. Think once, think twice, don't do Pickett's charge. So it's a little morale section when all this is done, and it's actually quite easy. However, what happens next is the guy who has lost the tempo bid now does his things. Now there's slightly different tempo points costs for things for the more passive player. It's a little bit more expensive for him to do things like order attacks, but it's cheaper for him to do things like order stand there and fire at longer ranges. They are trying to stop people with fire. But one thing the side that has lost the tempo can do is he can pay a bunch of tempo points, and if he moves his general in contact with one of his units, he can tell that unit to basically do a move that comes before the tempo winners go. So, guy wins the tempo, that's it, haha, I've got the attack. No, the defender can actually say, yes, except for these small guys who suddenly come around the side. So it's like, yeehaw! Battle of Antietam, Burnside's guys are going fine. They're like, yahoo! Hill arrives and Lee rides up and says, quick, do something about that. You can do that kind of thing. May I interject at this point and say, look, we used to play American Civil War a fair bit. If you're not American, it's kind of a nice thing to play because you just kind of enjoy the 19th centuryness of it. As Confederate players, it's like, fine, if you win, yay, you won a game. If you lose, yay, less people advocating slavery. It was kind of a win-win. You can use these rules for playing other 19th century games as well. Again, I'm going to harp on about the War of the Triple Alliance. Paraguay versus Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil. A fantastic little 19th century war happening at the exact same time, except it's got more variety and it's got way more kind of breech loaders and repeaters, and it's got hot air balloons, and it's got lancers left, right, and centre, gauchos. It's got rabid Paraguayan troops armed with all kinds of muskets and crazy. Fantastic. But anyway, so after you've done all of your little fire and your assaults, now we have a morale side. And what happens is any given command that you've got, which are essentially like a division, if you have taken loss of steadiness to that, you have to do a roll. Again, it's a simple d6 roll. In effect, what you're doing is you're rolling a d6 and you're adding up some different factors. If the roll is within a certain bound, then that unit becomes unsteady, or it might actually be spent, and spent units retire backwards and head for the baseline. And in this game, that's kind of it for them. They don't sort of rally. We'll look at the other game in a sec. But in effect, if you've taken more casualties than you've been able to keep healing with rallies and spending points, you will start having these little divisions. Sun will start to go unsteady and they'll start to crumble. So you've got to keep shoring it up. You've got to ideally have reserve lines. So, all right, these guys have taken a lot of unsteadiness and now they're starting to get some serious negatives. You've got to leapfrog another group past or withdraw these guys and bring in another line. That's your ideal. So, reserve lines, supported attacks supported with like smoothbore artillery and things like this. You get a bigger bonus for supporting with smoothbore than rifled, by the way. Cavalry zooming around on the flanks, making sure those attacks are well planned, well supported. Long range artillery shooting them in. A musket line maybe softening the enemy line. Then you've got these well constructed attacks. It's a really nice tactical game. So, the next set of rules you get in there is for the next sort of highest level. This is for big battles. And these ones are called a Crisis of Allegiance. Now, this allows you to fight like Gettysburg and Antietam and really big scale games. And I actually prefer this bigger one. Now, the bases for this are slightly bigger. They're the same width as the ones you use for the other, but they're twice the depth. So if you can make like these narrow oblong bases and use that to play On They Came, and then you can put them too deep and use them to play a Crisis of Allegiance, or you just make the bigger square bases for Crisis of Allegiance. And the samples I've got look great because they can do firing lines. They'll put some fallen timber and a couple of trees actually on the base to have a skirmish line out there. A few casualties. It looks great. Your whole diorama, each of these things going forward. So this is the strength of 6mm, and it looks fantastic. And that deeper base really lets you kind of play, or multiple lines of troops coming forward, or you can really play with it and make this spectacle, which is why we play miniatures. But so you've taken that leap upwards. So each of these bases now is representing pretty much like a brigade. It's about 1,500 to 2,000 men. So they give some examples where they've taken like groups of several different battalions, and this is such and such a brigade. All right, sometimes they've taken 2 historical short brigades and it makes 1 counter. These things are, of course, they're all rated for what kind of weapons they've got. Do they have smoothbore weapons? Do they have rifles? Or they can have breech-loading rifles or repeating rifles. The cavalry can have, essentially, they've got cavalry mixed short-range small arms, like, sort of shotguns and pistols and a couple of carbines and so on. Or they can be, carbine-armed. Or they can be, repeater-armed. Great fun. So, there also can be, they can be green, they can be veterans, they can be elite. You could be green elite. You could be guys who are brand new to it but are crazy. You could be reluctant veterans. Again, they've got sort of some nice ways of doing it, and they show some examples where they've taken like a Union brigade from 1863. Here's a bunch of regular like battalions that are 300 or 400 guys, and they've attached like a very, very veteran brigade to it. So what they've sort of said is, all right, here's what that looks like as a unit. This is a unit, one figure. It's the combined such and such brigade, and it's rifled muzzleloaders, and they'll have said these guys, they'll give them a little bonus because they've got the veterans stiffening the unit, so it'll say these are steady regulars or very steady regulars because they've got some veterans steadying them out. So you get some nice flavour to the different units. Some of them end up as kind of a hothead, some of them end up as steady, and so on. Nice. Again, you've got smoothbore and rifled artillery and so on. However, in this case, the overall commander-in-chief you've got is commander-in-chief of the army. So, we're talking about, Grant and Lee and so on here. Your sub-commanders are corps commanders, and now we don't even bother looking at divisional commanders. No, we don't even invite them to dinner. No, never. They're doing their thing down here, because with each of these square units as a brigade, a division's going to be like not that huge a collection of these. You know, there's going to be some supporting artillery and a couple of infantry units, and great. So no, it doesn't need a separate general. The general is the corps commander. This uses a similar system to the other game, the one contiguous game, but now we're worried less about the small minuate of equipment and so on. And we're looking at the bigger picture of bringing troops into battle. So once again, we've got that lovely tempo bidding system, and the ability to have the defender leapfrog that by having their commander-in-chief personally order a unit to seize the day from the guy who's actually got the initiative with a very small group. And it's done in the same way. Each person will do their bombardment, then there'll be a general firing section for infantry and so on, and then there will be assault if you've moved in. They simplify the shooting for muskets and so on in this, where so essentially if you're smoothbore, you pretty much have to be trying to move into contact in order to shoot. Only the rifled units will fire from like 1 or 2 or 3 base widths away. So if you've got smoothbores, bad luck, you're going to march right in there. And that essentially seats you into the assault system. Exactly like the other game, you've got this assault system where you've formed these groups, move them into the assault, and you check to see if they're driven away by fire, or if their fire in fact disrupts and drives away the other side and drives it to ground. If not, you resolve the combat on a dice roll. Again, it's very important that you support those lines, that there's like rear support, flank support, having the supporting artillery, prepping it by maybe disrupting them through artillery fire beforehand is great. In this larger scale one, when a command becomes tired, it can withdraw, and you'll get these small units that are failing and becoming tired will withdraw back. You can send generals in and rally them and try and hold them in place. They're now a damaged command and they're more vulnerable, but the game doesn't click off and stop as units rout off the table the way it does in the earlier one. So again, Pickett's charge goes in, gets a living daylights beaten out of it, staggers back. There is still someone standing at the trees to basically drag them in and try and form them back into a line. They're screwed. They're it's now a damaged command, but it doesn't just vanish. It's still there. So yeah, and you've got the same sort of morale system where you're checking to see are units taking more damage. And the larger the subunit, the more damage it can absorb before it starts to go to pieces. And again, you can bring in Army Reserve units and so on to stiffen lines and so on. The CNC can have units directly under his command. He can either use those and pay points to move them, or he can split things off and feed those into other commands. So you can bolster those damaged commands by sending more guys in, or keep your Napoleonic style Imperial Guard reserves and go thundering in to save the day. So look, Polemos, it's simple to play. It really is simple. It's clever. It gives me way more of a feel of the actual tactical problems facing those commanders than any other rule set that I've played. I keep seeing these ones, just rolling the dice and I roll to disrupt. So no, this one is, I've got to lay those bombardments. I'm trying to hold guys off with the musket lines, but eventually the only decisive way to get anywhere is to move in and do an assault, and I've got to do it right. I've got to have the right resources to do this, and I've got to pick the right moment and picking those times. that's what it's all about. So this gives you a wonderful feel of it, and it's designed for 6mm figures. It's not like someone's 15mm set that they've said, oh yeah, you can just use the 6mm if you want. No, designed with the smaller scale in mind. So you can find these on the Baccus website. Like I said, I found they work really, really well for other things like Wars of the Triple Alliance. We've also used the same rule set to play a few kind of 19th century things and some imaginations things as well, where you've invented your own countries and had some fun with them. Those make great campaigns. I love that. You take a few leaves out of Prisoner of Zenda and make up your own weird kind of Ruritanian country in the middle of heaven knows where. So anyway, I think Polemos is really well worth checking out. Baccus, they have a very cool range. They do everything from like fantasy through every historical period. They're currently expanding their World War II stuff. They've got their own World War II rules. They have their own Ancients versions of Polemos and so on out, which I have played, but for some reason their rules kind of they sit with very early Imperial Roman period stuff. They've chosen a specific period, which is great because actually sometimes Ancients rules that cover like Sumerian to Elizabethan, it's like, really? Okay, it doesn't have the specific flavour. And these guys have gone early Imperial Roman. They've also got some great stuff for sort of Malburian period, 1700s, Napoleonics. They've got a Napoleonic version of Polemos, which is very similar, obviously, to the American Civil War one. And again, it's a great set of rules for Napoleonics. So anyway, go to the Baccus Miniatures website, check it out. I don't think you'll regret it. That tempo bidding system and the ability to kind of bid for the initiative, but if you go crazy, it's going to actually affect the amount of orders you can actually give, and the fact that the other guy might either spend his defensive order points kind of sitting back and firing at long range, or he might clump a bunch of them together and try and jump the gun and steal your initiative from you. Great, very clever. Some gamesmanship there, which makes that whole thing work. So anyway, it is an excellent game. Do please take a look at it. If you like the reviews, by all means, find me on Patreon, subscribe. You'll find lists of my ways to find my novels and my games and all that sort of stuff. Plus, I've got stuff coming out soon from Chaosium and all that sort of thing. So, by all means, look up my stuff. Anyway, cheers, keep the dice rolling, keep having fun playing games. Cheers.